Hey, everybody, welcome back to Bit by AI. A series that we're wanting to start up here is really showing those solutions that we've come up with using AI tools. So, we're calling these segments solution spotlights. And today we're going to talk about vibe coding. If you're not familiar with vibe coding, it's a technique where a developer or anyone really, because you don't have to be an application developer, what you do is you describe your desired outcome in just natural language to an AI tool like Gemini. And then Gemini generates the code and creates the application, web page, etc. for you. And it makes for some really interesting things because it truly makes anything in your imagination potentially come to life with the help of Gemini. So, to just kind of get you on the same page as us, I'm going to pass it to Jordan here, and he's going to show, or Shannon, excuse me, and she's going to show kind of an example of how she's utilized some vibe coding specifically in her courses.
All right, so let me share my screen. So this is a vibe coding exercise I actually had my students do in a first year writing class. And it was a really simple prompt. I just wanted to find a fun way for them to practice what could be sort of a boring grammar lesson, which is active voice. So I had them start with this prompt. So they all opened up Gemini and we put in this really simple prompt. We just wanted a quiz to help practice active voice. And we pretty quickly got this response, which was a nice interactive quiz that students can take and they get feedback on the answers they choose just to practice the basics. And then we wanted to make it a little bit more exciting. So we started working with the prompt a little bit. I decided to make mine sort of a shooter game, but I told students they could do whatever they wanted here. So if they wanted something Tetris like or something Pac Man like, they could kind of get creative and figure out what they wanted. So this is what mine then looked like. I got this passive voice blaster game, which drops sentences, and then I can shoot them. And at first, it gave me sentences that were color coded, so it was too easy because I could tell which ones were passive and which ones were active just by color. So I refined it a little bit. And then the sentences were going too fast, and I didn't have time to shoot them. So again, I asked it to slow it down. And so after a couple of revisions, I got just a simple game that I decided was good. Now, if I wanted to keep refining it, I might have it add more or try to add multiple levels or maybe even try to add some music. Um, at some point, it will start to get a little weird or it won't work as well. So you do have to keep it relatively simple, but this was a great idea, and the students came up with a lot of different types of games to play. Everybody's was a little bit different.
How much coding experience do you have, Shannon?
I mean, none really, other than figuring out some HTML code along the way throughout the years, right? I've never
Right.
certainly never created a game with code, so yeah,
Were you tempted? Did you go into the code at all to kind of manually change anything?
I did not.
Okay,
No.
gotcha. I felt more comfortable kind of doing that with some of the stuff I've been doing. But it was literally eighth grade was the last time I like did any coding. Like the early days of like dial-up internet was the last time I messed with this stuff. So it's really fun to kind of come in here and sort of use your plain language to kind of describe, what you're going for, and you have the ability and like this is Gemini, right, Shannon?
It is, and I have gone into the code when I create things that I'm using for a course, like an HTML
Right.
page or an activity. If it's not quite right, I will go in and tweak the code. For this purpose, I didn't really need to because we were just making these quick little games.
Sure, but as a teaching tool, like you can switch in Gemini. It's so cool to be able to switch back and forth between the preview and the
Yeah.
code, and you see it in action. And so, if you're interested in coding, it's sort of a neat way to kind of practice some of that too. That's cool. I think unleashing student creativity with this is really interesting. I remember a few years ago asking students if they'd sort of tried using AI. The conversation's really different now. Like, have you tried to use AI to build study tools, that are
Yeah.
engaging and gamified? Is it's a fun
And
thing to be able to talk about.
that was part of what I talked to them about was that, this was sort of a silly experiment for this particular lesson, but that they could use this. Imagine what you could do if you need to study for a science test or, an exam-based course, concepts that you really need to know. Think about how much more fun you could have if you create a game like this, or even just the interactive quiz to help you study. So they were really interested in that aspect of it. They indicated that they didn't have a lot of instructors who were talking to them and showing them how to use AI in these ways that most of them were sort of either not bringing it up or telling them not to use it, and that was it. So,
I overheard faculty talking yesterday about sort of making the point that it wasn't their responsibility to talk about or deal with AI in any regard, and I think they're really missing an opportunity to really like let students like learn to learn in ways that really work for them, right? That don't
yeah.
just come from a textbook publisher or something like that, or from the internet. Like this is something they're in control of. It's really powerful. Can I transition over to some of my examples here really quick?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So I'm taking some classes, and I let's see if did I share my screen, Caleb, or not? Bet
Yeah,
I
we'll
haven't.
keep
There
it.
we go. Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Caleb. Cool. So I'm transitioning over to Google AI Studio, which is where I kind of cut my teeth playing around with some of these tools. This is nice because these features have come to Gemini recently, but this was an easy way I had to share it with classmates. And so I'm taking some classes, and I think I thought about vibe coding first as a student for some of the classes I was taking, and this may be a little challenging to see. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I'll do full screen. Perfect. Okay, so I built a tool because I was reading a lot of books for class, and I was thinking like, how do I remember what I read really well? And I actually found someone on social media who was building these really beautiful mind maps, and I never really found a good mind map tool. I love the concept, and I love on social media finding different diagrams that are really instructive. And so I was able to build something that it's really useful to my own process. Um, and so I used all sorts of, I think some Latin here, maybe some French. But the idea here is I could take my notes from a book I'm reading, and sometimes I'll just sort of dictate to ChatGPT as I'm taking notes. I'm reading passages from books I'm telling ChatGPT, hey, these are my thoughts. This isn't in the book. I'm going to come back to page 250. And I'm generating all these notes. And what I'm doing is doing a kind of a multi-step process where I can dump notes in here. It creates the structure that that this vibe coded tool needs to then generate what I'm calling a mind branch in the social media site that I got the idea from, called a mind branch. And so it creates this really nice, hopefully it works. I did not test this. It's been a little bit since I've done it. Perfect. Okay. So there's other tools that do this too. And we'll see if I can zoom in here. Yes. So lots of tools do this, but I was able to kind of do this on my own before I found other tools that would do this. And so I'm downloading these files. I'm actually putting them into a Notebook LM for safekeeping, but I can quickly glance at this Kurzweil book, Ray Kurzweil, Transhumanist Protocol for Longevity. And I have just a really nice snapshot of the stuff that I thought was important from this book. And this book really blew my hair back regarding the future of what AI could do for medicine specifically. And so just kind of describing and just having some sense of what I wanted for output, using Gemini on the back end of this was sufficient to get me to this place where I can walk away with, I can take notes from a book, verbally dictated, and end up with a really nice visual that I could print, put in a folder, and just reference to come back to this book when it's time to study or just recall what I learned, which I really like. And I'm really excited to kind of try, other use cases, other tools as well.
Do you think you could use something like that to start a blueprint for a course?
Yeah, let's transition. What I thought of this morning, and I'm still here in Google AI Studio, aistudio.google.com, using Gemini in the back end. My sort of course specific teaching example, I thought about this morning, and I actually asked ChatGPT, hey, give me like 10 ideas for things I could try to vibe code for the session today. And it mentioned rubrics, and I thought that's interesting because we're looking at, we're doing some course reviews for faculty. I'm looking at their rubrics and thinking about ways I could help them implement rubrics. We have lots of faculty that currently don't use rubrics. They're kind of a lot to manage potentially, or they might feel like they're a lot to manage. And so I wrote this up, my own language, not AI language. I said I want a vibe code of rubric tuner. Actually, that's what I want, tuner. And then I'm going to think about like, I can't even imagine quite the shape of what I want to do with it. But I think the idea is I want to be able to kind of describe my assignment. Shannon, you're an instructor, throw ideas at me. I want to be able to kind of describe the context, like the class, the outcome I'm trying to teach to, the education learning outcome, the major course objective, the CLO, whatever it is. Maybe even give it a sample rubric, or maybe just assignment descriptions and have it either generate a rubric for me or improve a rubric. And I know there's lots of tools out there that probably do this, but I think I probably want to kind of customize it. And I think doing it myself will help me learn. So I'm going to hit go on this build. if you wanted to kind of see you could pause the video if you wanted to see the prompt here. I was not too intentional about it, but I tried to give it some of the context. I mentioned our learning management system, D2L, Brightspace. I wanted to have that context because I could build an analytic rubric or a holistic one, right? It could be aligned with the gradebook or not, depending. We use the learning outcomes tool in D2L Brightspace. That might be something I want to talk about here too. So I'm having the conversation. The vibe coding experience for me in AI Studios, having this conversation in this sort of window on the side. You can see it's taking its time here. Looks like it's actually trying to build right away, which is interesting. But the really cool part of this is just that conversation with the AI tool, kind of describing, refining, brainstorming, and then being able to see over here the preview that it puts out. And Shannon, I jumped right into rubrics, but can you go back to your question or your idea initially too?
Oh no, well, that was about your mind map or whatever you called it. I was just
Yeah.
thinking about if you were just kind of generating ideas for a course, or you had just maybe a course guide and some thoughts to start with, could you use it to start mapping, literally making that mind map of what your course might look like?
Or the blueprint, like a blueprint, right? Like we
Yeah.
use course
Yeah.
alignment blueprints. Yes, and one thing I sometimes think about is like starting from scratch with an AI tool or chatbot that has no context would do a pretty good job with some of that. But the potential is here is to kind of create something that's like shareable, reusable, easy to refine. So I think the answer is yes. Um, since you had the idea, what thoughts would you have? What else would it need to have, Shannon, for our context for blueprinting? What would be the important elements, or how many steps would it take, do you think?
I think it depends on if you're trying to complete a blueprint from an already built course. I was
Hmm.
thinking more along the lines of you're just getting started developing a new course or making major revisions or something like that, and you wanted to kind of start fresh. That's to me where like mind branching or mind mapping is useful. It's like the pre-writing phase, right? The brainstorming phase. So that's how I was
Yes.
thinking of it in terms of, oh, I know I'd kind of like to do this project, or I know like we need to focus on these skills, or um, you know, can we use it to
Yes.
start laying that idea out? If you wanted to do it a blueprint on a course that's already built, then you would give it specific files and things like that. If you were just starting out, you might give it a course guide, and then put notes in, right? Here's what I'm thinking so far, kind of a brain dump.
Yes, I like your
Mhm.
first idea. I think that's really promising. I could think of that being very multi-step, and that was one thing I had to realize was that this is like multiple chats in one. Like it's a series of steps, right? Like it's your notes, and then it's this next piece that's organized, and then it's the image. But I think this would be multi-step even further in terms of maybe each ELO would be its own thing, right? And all the supporting competencies would be a piece of that. The time element, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think it could be similar to this, where this was multi-step with multiple buttons, and that's one. And your game is a good example of that too. The ways in which it can have you can move from one stage to the next when
Yeah.
you build something like this. And there's even easier tools. I haven't played too much around with it, but like I think Google's Opal is another way to kind of like visualize what your app can look like, kind of one piece at a time. And then
Mhm.
what you end up having is just like lots of chatbots who have very specific roles that help you, every step of the way. Real quick, and I'm cognizant of time. I know Travis has something to share too. Look at this. It's already, I didn't really give it that much context. I have actually 4 files I wanted to upload regarding some of that context. Like, I actually wanted to tell it for the rubric tuner. I wanted to give it the 10.0 and the 11.0 from our course guide, which kind of describes like all the grading criteria and like how assessments are done in the course. I thought that would be a useful piece here. So I haven't even given it very much context, just that paragraph. I sort of already have a tool here that asks me to describe the assignment. Okay, give it that context from the syllabus, give it the existing rubric. One thing I might add here, just off the bat, is can I upload a file directly to this field? That would be cool. I might try that. Oh, this is cool. And then I get to these are select boxes. Yeah, so like people, like, it's so easy to kind of engage with the chatbot directly and you're just having a conversation, but that next level is like building something that really really works for you, and your experience will be different, what you need will be different, but that's kind of the promise of vibe coding something. Before we transition to Travis, not maybe I'll keep playing around with this in the background. I'm going to ask if I can add a field to upload the existing rubric. Can I make it so that I can upload a file directly to the existing rubric field. I won't even correct my typo. Let's see what it does.
Yeah, some other cool elements is it kind of created a form for you that then turns that into the generated tuned rubric. So some other things you may want to consider is like what else you could put into the form, especially if you want to share with other people that like may have a different mindset or may have different pieces to it. Like you said before, is like adding competencies or adding certain things that'll link to it. Is maybe they can like choose also, one of the different pieces that we have. So like if you upload a file for like our ELOs, and then they can just choose from those automatically, that might be one piece just to make it a little bit faster. And then the same thing for even that mind map to create like a blueprint, is that you could kind of create it as a form almost, and then they just click it at the end and they generate, and it'll generate that overall blueprint for them based on their inputs.
You're totally right. Yes, look, it did it already. And I love this. And I'm sort of underselling this feature, but this ability, like it doesn't have to recode, and you can watch it code too. But you can just have that conversation. You can say, hold off on making improvements. Let's really iron this out over here. Caleb, before we hit record, you were talking about how you'll sort of have multiple conversations going on and kind of different iterations of tools you're building before you kind of get to the one that you think is more kind of ready to kind of work with. You kind of work with the code outside of the context of the specific place you're building. Sometimes that's probably a pretty good place. I've been talking for a while. It's probably a pretty good place to transition. I can't believe that I already sort of have something that appears to be functional here. I love that it's just going to spit it out right at the bottom here. My next question will be, and I can take it offline, is like, what does that output look like? Is it text? In terms of the rubric, could it help me supply feedback? Could the tool itself help me like generate like original feedback that I can deliver in the to learners based on like how they respond, or based on their submission, would be sort of another level here, potentially like a snapshot or example of the student's work or something like that. But I'm really excited about this idea. I'm glad you guys put this on our calendar for today, because I've got a new thing to build.
And I like the suggestions at the bottom just before like the text field where you can put in your prompt, where it says you can add AI features, improve the layout, add example data. That is pretty cool, so that you can just, if you're testing something and you don't have data right away, you can just say, add some example data. You can kind of see what that looks like.
Yeah, that's the example I had over here were my notes, but it was really nice to have that as a sample, right? To just show how the tool works, especially if you're sharing it with someone. Totally. Good time to transition to Travis.
Sure, and I can expand a little bit on the conversation regarding having multiple conversations going at the same time. I think one thing I've run into when doing some vibe coding type projects is oftentimes I'll have something and I'm pretty happy with it and it works, but I want to add a few more things to it. And when I add a few more things to it, it breaks and it like doesn't work anymore. And I want to go back to my old version and basically start over. So that's really where that comes into play too. You can kind of be like, all right, this is my my version 1.0, for example. I'm going to kind of let this hang out on the side. I'm going to grab the exact code set that it gave me, copy and paste that into a new chat, and then let's continue building on some 2.0 features in this one. So that's something that's helped me out as well. I'm just going to show kind of a fun example, an example that I probably put together in less than 20 minutes. Being on a team where most of the team is remote and we're located around the country and things, we're constantly looking for ideas of how to get to know each other a little bit better and have some fun as well. So I have a game at home called Tapple. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Tapple. But Tapple is kind of a party game where there's this circular device that sits at the middle of the table. A category comes out, there's a timer, and you go around the table and you have to say something that starts with the letter A that is in that category. And when you do it, you press down the letter A on this circular device. It goes to the next person, and then they have 10 seconds to name something in that category, but they can't use the letter A anymore. They have to use one of the other letters. You just keep going until someone runs out of time, or if you run out of letters, it actually resets, all the letters come back, and you keep going. So
Hmm.
I wanted a way to do that virtually, so I wouldn't have to have that strange device on camera and do it myself. So uh, threw this out there. Again, I do own Tapple, so Milton Bradley or Hasbro or whoever makes the game, you don't have to be mad at me. And I'm not planning to sell this, but Tapagories is what I came up with, and it does everything start to finish. I don't even have to get my cards out, so I can hit new category. It scans through some
Oh, that's
things.
awesome.
Like, all right, sports teams. Boston Celtics. Hit that. It resets the timer to 10 and keeps counting down. And you can just simply go through all the letters as a team. People shouting them out, going around the
Diamondbacks.
yeah Diamondbacks. Yep.
Mhm.
Um, Oakland A's, if that's
There you
even
go.
still
Oh,
a
nice.
team, or they're kind of out the
I
door,
think they
right?
are. I think they are. Yeah, yeah. Mariners. Mariners.
Mariners almost
Mhm.
made the World Series this year.
Yeah,
Almost.
yeah. Blue
Um,
Jays, or Blue Jays in the World? Sorry, I'll stop. Sorry.
yeah, it is. Yep, Blue Jays are the team against the Dodgers, I believe. So anyway, time runs out on that, but just a real simple example of something where you're kind of able to go from nothing to something in not all that long of time. And just kind of some future ideas here is I would like to introduce a way for people to put in their names before the game starts. That way, at the top of the screen, it says, "Hey, Caleb, it's your turn. Travis, it's your turn. Shannon, etc." And then introduce like a high score table where it recognizes, oh, the time ran out on that person, so they get -1 points or whatever. And then each time they click on something, they get a point. So anyway, that'll be kind of a future iteration of this, but all done with limited knowledge of how these various coding languages work. I can kind of stumble around and kind of figure out what's going on, but it was pretty nice to be able to get that thrown together and very easily talk back and forth and just be like, hey, I don't like that the tiles are green. Can you make them blue? It's as simple as just saying something like that, hitting enter, and it does that. And that's just a very simple example, but that's really the power of using these tools and vibe coding in general.
And sort of a related note, that we had a meeting with Learning Center staff a few weeks ago where like this kind of conversation came up, and there was a real appetite from the staff to either build these types of tools, like learning tools for students, or even think about how to guide students toward building their own tools. Like they saw that potential, which is interesting. And one of those staff members, her experience with coding was those punch cards from the 1970s, but she was able to kind of see the potential in terms of what we could do and what we could unleash with student learning, which is really neat. So I'm really excited as a learner and an instructor. I'm really thinking about, I'm curious if you are, Shannon, the spring semester, like what, especially if I'm teaching face-to-face courses, what could I unleash, because how could I unleash student learning in this way? Like how could this be their projects? You're doing it this semester. I'm sharing some tools that I built, like notebooks from Notebook LM with learners, with my notes and things like that. But I haven't asked students to build yet, but I think the potential there is pretty awesome. What's the most creative thing you've seen so far from your students?
Well,
What
that's the
surprised you?
only that active voice lesson's really the only thing we've done because it's a writing class. So,
Sure.
we don't have a ton of opportunity to use AI to develop projects, but I'm definitely going to think about it more. And I don't know, maybe not everything we do is an essay. So if they could maybe create like infographics or something like that where they have to input the text,
Right.
right? But Gemini can take over the design. That would be cool. I think that would work well.
How could it's different because the vibe, it becomes the code, and so the remnants of language aren't so much there. But what they had to build had to contain essays? What if it had to spit out their completed essays? Right? Like what if it's hard for me to sort of imagine what that would look like, but I think with time I could, like, the app itself could contain lots of their writing and show that to the user too.
Yeah,
Like,
they could develop like forms like you just did for the rubric, but maybe to like capture all of their research and then spit out I don't know, something that they can then use to incorporate it into their work. Something like that I think could work.
yeah, the memory of these tools is pretty incredible. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it can
Yeah.
capture a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, something our learning center brought up that was a really good one is also like something that helps them with note taking, where they can also categorize their notes and stuff too. So having them build their own version of something where they just input their notes and then it categorizes it, puts it together for them in a simple layout of HTML text. That might even be a nice helpful tool for somebody that's especially new to college.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely great for accessibility.
Students clamor for like PowerPoints, and not every class is the same. Like some classes don't offer power. A student might think they really, really need PowerPoints, and the instructor will never offer them. And so you could sort of, as a learner, you could, if you know what you need and you're not going to get it from an instructor, this could really sort of help fill some of those gaps, right? And if you're an instructor and if you don't know how to do a thing, like the AI tool could help you actually offer the thing that your students have been asking for a long time, potentially. Well, that's cool. Awesome. Vibe coding.
Yeah, and don't
Yeah.
forget that there are a lot of tools built into your browser and built into Gemini itself that you can kind of stack on top of this. Like if you want to introduce into your coding that you're doing, if you want to introduce that it turns on a webcam and you take a quick picture of something and then it does something with that picture, you can do that type of stuff. Image generation, I think we're kind of seeing bits and pieces of that with Jordan's example. Upload a file.
Right.
Don't forget that you can get that sophisticated with what you're doing. It doesn't need to be just a static thing that has a couple of interactive buttons like my Tapagories game. You can do so much more than that. And I think that's where the lights really started going off in my head when I saw someone take a webcam and generate an image based on the picture that it took with the webcam. Just makes the workflow a little bit easier rather than going into a different application or pulling out your phone, snapping a picture, downloading the picture, uploading it to the app. Just different workflows like that are some interesting things to think through.
What do you wish you could do faster, better? That's sort of your unique challenge or whatever.
Right.
That's cool. When we showed the early example, we talked about using Gemini, which we have on at the college, and it's the Canvas tool, right? Within Gemini, that's probably the easiest way to kind of play with it. My other thought was, depending on how much time we've got, I think there are some presets, right, in like Gemini currently, where like, doesn't it kind of invite you to kind of build stuff in Gemini now all of a sudden? Kind of the same concept. Like if you're just trying to dip your toes in, what's the best way to get started?
Yeah, generally speaking, when you open up a new chat, it'll kind of have some recommendations on what you want to do. But yeah, I would suggest when it comes to vibe coding, go directly into the Canvas feature right away and start iterating from there.
And so, and ask it what's possible too, right? Within your instance,
Yep.
with what tools you have connected or don't have connected. Like that has always been it seems to be always good advice. Ask the chatbot what it can do. It's just brainstorm first. Yeah.
Yeah, meta prompting is a really helpful tool. So just giving a context of like your course and everything first, and then going from there is a huge piece. And then you can even say like, this is the level that my students are at, this level I'm at. How can we step this process through? And what do you suggest is like something cool that we could do as an interactive app or feature or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Have that separate chat thread going to scope out what you want to do first, then build it. Then after you've built it, do a different chat and be like, hey, what ideas do you have, Gemini? How can this be even better? And then do an even newer version. Also want to promote, hit the microphone button in Gemini and actually talk. That has made a huge difference for me because I type much differently than I talk. And sometimes we get a little lazy when we talk or when we type. So when you talk, you're really giving Gemini lots of information about what you're looking at.
Awesome.
Well, now you've derailed the rest of my day because I would just want to go play with this now.
We got a meeting.
Yeah, I know.
All right, happy vibe coding, people.
Game over.